Welcome back to Education Matters. Did you correctly answer A, 5 schools? While legislation has been introduced to expand it, currently the North Carolina Teaching Fellows Program is only available in 5 campuses and last year provided scholarships for 74 students. The original program recruited 500 new teaching fellows every year to one of 17 colleges and universities across the state. Now we're going to continue our series of interviews with the announced candidates to date for State Superintendent of Public Instruction. There are 4 right now in the Democratic primary, which is scheduled for March of 2020, and today we have the final of the 4 so far, James Barrett. James, welcome to Education Matters.
Thank you, and thank you for all the work that the forum does.
All right, thank you so much. I mentioned in the introduction you currently serve on the Chapel Hill Carver City's Schools Board of Education. I think you actually chaired that board. You've been on what, 8 years?
8 years.
8 years on the board. You're also you're an IT professional. That's your day job,
Absolutely,
as it were.
yeah.
So. One of the things when I was looking at your bio, you are a public school kid like me. You attended all through public schools, and your kids do as well. So tell me a bit about sort of what your North Carolina story when it comes to education.
So my mom was a teacher for many, many years, and she actually taught in the same system that I grew up in Chapel Hill in North Carolina, and the same system my kids went to. So I went to some of the same schools that they went to. They seemed bigger at the time, but they also were in better shape at the time. You know, we have all this issue with the bond and renovations we need to do around the state.
Right. So first question I'm going to ask you is the same first question I've asked the previous 3 candidates. Why are you running for state superintendent? Why do you feel like that you need to be the next state superintendent of public instruction?
I believe that every student can be successful. And I see, as a school board member, sometimes we see kids at their lowest because they're appealing some suspension or something. And when I get to see those same kids walk across the graduation stage or get some award for some achievement, I know that every kid can be successful. And that motivates me. It motivates me every day in the work of the school board. And I believe the interesting thing, we've done this research about how much relationships matter. And the state superintendent can't force every teacher to have a great relationship with every student, but we can be a model within DPI. And so my management experience, I know that I can restore the relationships that exist within the Department of Public Instruction. I know that my policy experience, listening to teachers, the background that I have in that, I know that we can do a lot to restore respect for teachers and build the relationships with all of the teachers across the state. And then I also have an advocacy background. And I believe strongly that the state superintendent should be an advocate for all of our schools across the state and rebuild the relationship that exists between the schools and the community. And when we do that, we will once again have the greatest public education system in the country.
You know, when the Public School Forum, we released our top 10 education issues back in January, the top issue was about renewing our commitment to public education. And you just kind of alluded to that. Do you feel like that, as someone who grew up in North Carolina like me, do you feel like that we have the same sort of commitment to public schools and public education that we used to have?
Somehow we've created this as a partisan issue. And that's created divides within our schools, and it's created a divide between various systems that we have. We need to get back to a single public education system that serves every student across the state of North Carolina.
All right, let me ask you about some issues and some of your top issues. You just heard in the previous segment, we had Representative Elmore and Clemens. They were both, one Republican, one Democrat, both talking about over testing. What's your sort of take on the issue of assessments and testing in North Carolina?
I think we need to take a step back and think about what assessments are for. The first thing that we need assessments for is that students need to know where they stand. It's a motivation factor for them. Second, teachers need to know how students are doing so they can guide instruction. And public policy is really the third reason that we do assessments. And it is the least important reason. And unfortunately, all the conversations we have today are about how do we measure schools, how do we give them grades. That's not why we should.
Is that what you want to say? I was going to say, explain that. You mean what the public policy, meaning the tests are really given. Well, we talked about it a little bit with in the previous segment, the A to F school grades,
right,
for example.
That's the least important reason to do testing. It's not about how we allocate money. It shouldn't be about how we pay teachers. It should be about the kids knowing the motivation for what they need to do, and teachers need to know what they need to do next. That's why we should do testing. And to the extent that we can use results out of their assessments to guide public policy, we have the technology. We ought to be able to do that today.
Right. Well, you, as a school board member, I assume you're in schools and you talk to teachers. So what do they tell you about some of their challenges? Where do they feel like that they need some additional help?
Well, they need, the biggest thing that comes up these days is mental health resources. Mental health is a huge challenge across all the schools across the state, whether it be because students living in poverty and has the trauma associated with that, but it also exists in our high achieving schools where the pressure, the daily pressure that exists to achieve more and more because of the society we live in and what's necessary to be quote unquote successful is so great. And so we need mental health support in each and every one of our schools.
So you mentioned you've got one of your children is in college. I've got a daughter who's a freshman, and as one of those things that as she got older and I got to know a lot of her friends and be around other people, I am struck by sort of the anxiety and some of the issues. It just seems like, I don't know, things that I was worried about with children are kind of different right now.
And they're things that we as adults struggle to talk about.
Right.
The kids have no trouble talking about it.
No, they don't.
They know that they're all experiencing the same thing. They all know that every one of them is in therapy if they can afford it privately. It's a real challenge, a daily challenge.
All right, let's talk about teachers. There's a called march for teachers coming up in May. There's some various priorities that I mentioned in the first segment. Sort of where do you come down? One, I guess, do you support a march like that? And also sort of the issues, some of them they talked about, restoring master's pay. You talked about respect to the profession, restoring retiree health benefits. Sort of where do you come down on some of those issues?
I think they're all very reasonable asks, right? I mean, they address the mental health issues that I just talked about. They also address paying our classified staff that don't get paid enough and bringing them up to a living wage, which the state did for other employees outside of schools. There are a lot of really, really important things in there. And so I support all those asks, and I support the fact that, I don't support, if our legislature was really listening to teachers, they wouldn't have to be marching.
Okay.
And so it may be disruptive to families, but it's for long-term benefit of all of our schools.
Right. All right. One of the you mentioned the division and some of the political things. School choice, in the broadest sense, including homeschooling, private school vouchers, charter schools. Just sort of quickly, so where do you stand? First of all, where do you stand on the use of taxpayers' dollars for private school vouchers?
I don't understand why that's even constitutional. We have a constitution that says the General Assembly will provide for a single public school system. And now we've got a completely unaccountable, separate public money going to something that is not the same as a common good. And so I don't support that at all.
What about charter schools and sort of we've seen since the charter school 100 school cap was lifted in 2010, 2011, and we've seen the number of charter schools double. Do you have any concerns, or you think that's a good thing for North Carolina?
I think we have to focus on quality of all of our schools. Charter schools have to be high quality, and one of the ways that they claim they can get to high quality is because they have flexibility. Why do district schools not have that same exact flexibility in order to be able to serve all kids? The focus has got to be on quality, whether it be a traditional school or a charter school.
Right. I just want to ask you real quickly, there was you don't serve on a school board without getting involved in, you're going to make somebody mad at some point, right? With things like reassignment, you got embroiled in a little bit of controversy around a Mandarin Chinese immersion school in Chapel Hill. Sort of where did that thing end up, and sort of what's your take on that?
So we were trying to expand the program at no additional cost. That is one of those choices that we think people ought to be able to have. And it would have displaced some kids, and people get very, very upset when they get moved out of their schools. And so that broiled over, unfortunately, to a really ugly degree. But it was really, it was about serving the needs of all kids and providing high quality options.
All right. Well, like I said, if you throw your hat in the ring, or you serve in any kind of office, you're going to deal with controversy. But anyway, we appreciate you coming on the show today and talking about your priorities, and hopefully we'll get a chance to have more conversations with you and the other candidates as we move forward.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. After the break, this week's final word.